Welcome to the Dental Implant Practices podcast, where each episode will explore how to integrate dental implants into your practice and into bone, with your host, Dr. Philip Gordon.
Welcome to the next episode of the Dental Implant Practices podcast. I'm your host, Philip Gordon, and today we've got a special guest, Dr. Charles Blair. The coding, and how would you define your specialty, Dr. Blair? Was it insurance navigation or?
Yeah, that's good enough. Yeah, insurance coding, insurance administration is sort of the area where I am, and I've been sort of in this throughout my life. I've kind of climbed a mountain about every 15 years. So my latest mountain to climb, starting about 2004 or 5, was on my initial coding book.
Okay. Now, a little introduction for you. You were a graduate of the University of North Carolina School of Dentistry in 1974. And
that's correct.
You practiced dentistry for roughly 10 years as a practitioner.
That's right.
And then at that time, you pursued some advanced degrees in business and accounting before you started some consulting that you've been doing for roughly 30 years now. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep. I picked up accounting and business degrees. I've always been kind of a student and always loved, in a sense, going to school. And so I got out, finished my dentistry kind of phase, and always loved what I did. I was in the Navy before that about 5 years, which I really enjoyed. I enjoyed practice of dentistry, and then got into some tax and financial planning and formed a company with John McGill, the Blair McGill. And then about 2004 or 5, right in there, also sold dental practices. So I've got quite a, varied background. And then we got into coding. And what prompted me was that the ADA book was just kind of a list of codes. And I felt like there was really a need for easy deciphering the coding. And so I came up with the Code with Confidence book. It's grown to 448 pages over the years, and it has icons. We've got, you look up a code and it tells you the narratives and tells you warnings and just a lot about, each code. And so that's what we initially started with.
Sure. And just to tell you, there's probably not a week that doesn't go by in my office that we don't reference that book at least once or twice. And I've got a very experienced veteran team, so that really goes to show you the value in those books and in the information in there. As you can probably attest, that information is always changing and is always needing to be re-emphasized with staff.
That's right, and the codes come out now every year. Way back in the old day, when I first opened up, codes only came out every 5 years. 5-year cycle.
Sure.
Then it went to a 2-year cycle, and now it's a 1-year cycle. And interestingly, while the coding is still quite a challenge, the insurance administration piece of this, PPOs, how to handle write-offs, all that stuff. So we wrote an administrative book. It's in its 3rd volume, and it'll be available here in just a couple of weeks, the new 2017 edition. And it's a monster 416 pages. And if there's anything that the offices don't know, it's they're just leaving so much money on the table in this administrative area. And this book solves that issue.
And is that the Administration with Confidence?
Yes, sir. And that book is our call center gets about 6,000 calls. The books don't have support.
Sure.
But our online practice booster system does. And when you join that, it's $297 a year, not a month.
Okay.
And you get the code book on steroids, you get the Insurance Solutions newsletter, and you get medical and dental call support. So if the team has any issues with any of that, they can call our call center. Our call center gets about 6,000 calls a year, and more than half are not coding, but they're actually insurance administration. And we're not lawyers, but a lot of the calls start off with, is it legal for us to do this, legal for us to do that? You mean the PPO can require us to turn in everything, even tooth whitening? Yes. And so, boy, that administrative side is a tough cookie for today's teams.
Absolutely. I think, and to your point, we have both of those books in my office, and I know I generally go to the Coding with Confidence book, being the dentist, and I know my office managers typically pick up the Administrating with Confidence book, and so we both have the books that we like for the different things we do, but I was not aware of all that your program covers there, so I think we'll definitely sign up for that, and would encourage others to do so, because a lot of times, yeah, it's the okay, I know what code to use, I know what to do, but there's other questions that maybe come up that still need some clarification.
Yeah, I give a little quiz when I lecture, and I lecture almost somewhere every week, but the flunk rate is about 95%, and these are seasoned offices, but the gist of it is when there's dual insurance, what they don't know is that the patient always gets the benefit of the lower contracted fee. And so if I'm a member of two PPOs, maybe daddy has a plan, mama has a plan, then the patient's responsible for the lower of those PPO fees. And then the other thing in a nutshell is offices do not realize that you can keep up to your full fee. They think, oh, the PPO fee here is $700. My fee is $1,000. The maximum I can put in my pocket is $700. That's untrue. If there's dual insurance, you have not been overpaid up to your full fee. So if I put $1,000 on the claims form, then I can keep up to $1,000. I have not been overpaid. So if I'm in two lousy PPO plans, mama has a plan, daddy has a plan, a kid comes in, it might be that you actually get your full fee. Under coordination of benefits rules, secondary can coordinate up to the primary fee, up to the secondary fee, or you might knock a home run and actually coordinate up to the full fee of the practice. So sometimes we knock a home run with dual insurance, and we're in two kind of lousy PPO plans in terms of fee schedules, but we walk away from the table with our full fee. And another thing is we always submit full fees to insurance companies. We never, ever put the PPO fee on any claim form. And the purpose of putting PPO fees in our computer system is to let the patient know what patient responsibility is. So I say, Ms. Jones, we participate with Delta Premier. Our crown fee is $1,000, and the Premier fee, allowable fee, is $800. So when you do come in for your first visit, you need to bring in $400. It's going to be 50% of the allowable fee, and then we'll get the other $400 from the insurance company later when we, submit the claim. And so we can estimate for the patient what their responsibility is, not what our, full fee is. So that's how that works. Sure,
and I'll bet a couple tips just like that would more than pay for your resources, and many more to come, I'm sure. So I'm sure there's a bunch of tips that even experienced dental offices and managers may not be aware of. Jumping into the implant field, where do you see the future of dental implants is going as far as off administration and billing and insurance?
Well, let me, first of all, maybe just give about a minute about kind of where I think our profession is going, because this kind of tees up the implants a little bit.
Sure.
First of all, I think there's three major trends and I've been around, like I said, about 40 years. One major trend is PPOs, and there's 14 PPO plans sold now for each indemnity plan. So the future is a PPO world. If you're out of network right now and can survive, and we look at if the doctor's booked out a week and a half, 2 weeks out, you're not a member of any plan, you're in good shape. If you're booked out just a couple of days, you're on the ropes and need to really look and re-examine. So I've kind of fought the PPO thing for years and years and years, but the last 5 years or so, things have really, really tightened up. And so PPOs is a PPO world. Second thing is corporate dentistry is coming in. Right now, it's only 8-10% of the profession is employed by the major corporations, but they may hit 20-25%. Who knows? The pundits are saying maybe 8-10 years we'll be at 25%. Who knows? 15 years from now, it might be half the dentist work for corporations, like happens in optometry. And the other thing is we're moving from a solo to a 2 and 3 doctor under one roof, because the corporate model in a nutshell efficiently can address technology. And the reason we're moving more into group practice is the cost of technology, the cost of cone beam and CAD/CAM and so forth. So the corporate model, and there's different models of this, but in a nutshell, it's you work or build a facility that 2 people work in, 3 doctors assigned. You run 7 to 7, 5 days a week, half day Saturday. The 3 doctors try to kind of subspecialize as much as possible. Don't send out a lot to specialists. Possibly a part-time specialist might rotate through. And then you've got cone beam, you've got CAD/CAM right there on the premises. And so that's kind of the future practice that we see out there. There's some exceptions, but I think pretty clear that that's where we're headed. And the solo practice will continue to cut back, and we'll see that. Now, addressing implants, the technology is changing things such that implants now, with the cone beam that we have and so forth, then we can precisely know where to place them and that type of thing. And the technology has made it easier for GPs to do implants. And I think in Europe that GPs do the vast majority of implants. And so the future is going to be that the specialists tend to do the more complex cases, and then the GPs, certain GPs will certainly want to get into that area. And so I think technology is driving this. Another thing is a lack of busyness. The average doctor does 90 procedures a year. The referendodontist does 60. The decathlon doctor does about 120 procedures a year. So the busier doctors often are the decathlon doctor. They do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You want to be good at what you do. But the days of being a referendodontist and cutting back and not doing a lot of procedures is pretty much over. And so the trend is to do a lot more procedures. And so implants are being adopted. There's mini implants. There's full-size implants. By the way, there is a new code for mini implants. It's code 6013. And the regular full-size implant is code 6010.
When was that mini implant code established?
It's just a few years old. I don't know. I lose track of time, but I think roughly about 3 years here, 2-3 years, code 6013. And also the locators, when we do implant overdentures, let's say I'm doing 4 mini implants on the lower jaw, and these mini implants kind of look like a wood screw, of course, with a ball on top. And then there's I'll call it a female clip up in the denture. And we call that clip is essentially what we call a locator. And the code for that clip, if we're doing mini implants, is 5862. Now, if I'm doing full-size implants, we have a different code for the locator. It's code 6052. And the 6052 has a male piece that goes down in the implant, and then it has a female, we'll call it a keeper assembly, up in the denture, and then that snaps in and out. So if we're doing a classic 2 full-size implants on the bottom, that's code 6010. And then the locator is code 6052 for each of those 2 implants. And then the overdentures, we now have a new set of codes. They're about a year old of overdenture codes, and they start with code 6110. That's an upper, and 6111 is a lower. So if I'm doing a lower implant overdenture with full-size implants, then I'm going to have a 6111 implant overdenture, and then I'm going to have 2 locators, 6052. Now, I did want to talk about for a moment, there is a new code associated with the full-size implant, and the new code is 6011. It's brand new, and that is second stage surgery. So I'll give an example. I put my implant in, and it's 6010, and it's submerged. It's osseointegrating. We then uncover the implant. uncovering the implant and putting healing caps in, or uncovering the implant and then putting abutments in, that second stage surgery code is 6011, and it's brand new. Now, the 6011 code, what the insurance industry has done, some of them have cut back the fee on the implant and then allow the separate fee for code 6011. And that fee is around $150, $200 for that second stage surgery. So the listeners need to be aware of this code 6011. They need to look at our resources and read all about that, because that is a recent implant code.
Yeah, and I've actually found some of those out to be true this year. I think the second stage surgery, I had some implants come to me, and I was going to uncover them, and so we had to find that 6011 and charge appropriately. And then we also found out kind of the hard way that 6111, the implant overdenture, I think that changed January of 2016. So we charged one out January 16 and had an awful fight on our hands until we realized the code had changed. So that's when we really, really kept diving deeper into, trying to get an understanding of all that, because implants are changing rapidly, the codes are changing rapidly, and the insurance coverage on implants are changing. So there's a lot of moving parts with that, as you stated there.
Well, the coding too is kind of complex, and one reason is that we've got certain codes in perio, namely the guided tissue regeneration, the barrier membranes. 4266 is resorbable, 4267 is non-resorbable. So the membranes, if you would use them, should be separately billed out, and they are separately stated. Then in the implant surgery or implant area, there's a number of codes, but there is a 6104 code, which is a bone graft in conjunction with implant placement. So if I pull a tooth today, put an implant in, put a graft in today, that graft code is 6104. And then in the oral surgery area, back in the 7950, 7951, 52, and so forth, back in there, that's where we've got the onlay graft for an edentulous area. We've got the sinus lift. There's two types. There's the vertical punch method sinus lift, which is simpler, and there's the Wenda 7951 Wenda approach sinus lift. And then the bone graft for socket preservation is 7953. Now, we do see some people miscoding. They're using the 4263 code back from osseous surgery. When we do osseous surgery, there are associated bone grafts where there's a natural tooth, and some people are jumping on those bone grafts, 4263, 4264. That's incorrect bone graft coding. The 7953 is the bone socket. And by the way, as I'm explaining this, our insurance newsletter, Insurance Solutions newsletter, it's the only coding newsletter in the country. We did an article about a year ago, roughly, on implants with a lot of photography. We did an article on bone grafting A to Z, and that's a part of our Practice Booster online system. It's $297 a year, and you get essentially the code book on steroids, and you get all the Insurance Solutions newsletters for the last 3 years and some other stuff. So that online program, if they do sign up for that and go to our website, it's practicebooster.com, then when you do get the Practice Booster, be sure you go in there to those old issues of our newsletter, and it's just a treasure trove of all kinds of topics, everything from endodontic access hole closure to implants to ortho, you name it. We've done articles, and our newsletter comes out every other year, and it's a part of the Practice Booster online. So this coding is getting much more complex, trying to keep up with it, and the implant area, they're just adding a good many codes each year. So I'm kind of hitting the highlights here. 6053, 6054, those used to be our overdenture codes for implants, and those are dead. And now we've got 6111, which is the removable overdenture. And then we've got a new set of codes that start at code 6114 to 6117. Those 4 codes are for all on 4s, all on 6s.
Sure, like a fixed hybrid, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, a fixed one. And those codes start at 6114. So these new implant overdentures, either removable or fixed, start off at that 6110, and then they go down to 6117 is the sequencing down through there of those 8 codes that cover 4 of the codes are removable, 4 of the codes are for that fixed hybrid.
Yeah. Now to go back for a second, I think I want to touch on one thing that you talked about. If a patient comes in and we were looking at a tooth that had to come out and we were thinking about an implant and we're going to take a traditional path, one might code for an extraction and then a bone graft, socket preservation, and a membrane. So
if the membrane was required, yes. The membrane might be done, if it's a clean socket and it's a good socket, some might just do a bone graft. And then if a bony wall is missing there, then you would do the membrane. And the membranes can be resorbable, which are much more popular. That's 4266. Or they can be non-resorbable, 4267.
So what type of it, if it's a simple extraction, obviously, that's a 7140, correct? And if it's a surgical, what defines surgical? And then, like you said, the bone preservation grafting needs to be the one in the surgery. So what would the extraction, bone, and membrane be on a basic socket preservation? What would that sequence look like?
If it's a simple extraction, so to speak, we can elevate it out. 7140 is for routine baby teeth, permanent teeth, and exposed roots. 7210 is our surgical extraction. They're going to drop the word surgical, by the way, starting this January 1. But the surgical extraction is 7210. And that means I'm picking up a handpiece. That means I'm either going to section the tooth to remove the tooth in pieces, or I'm going to remove bone from around the tooth, or a combination of the two in order to get the tooth out. And that's a surgical extraction. Now, surgical extraction is not putting a suture in. It's not laying a flap. So we've got to have a handpiece with the 7210 code, and we got to bring it out in pieces or remove bone or do a combination of the two. And then, so we'd do our extraction, and then our bone graft would be a 7953. And then our membrane, if needed, would be a resorbable, would be a 4266. So that's how we code all that out.
Sure. And then a traditional path implant could be a
6010 would be your full-size implant that goes in, yes. And then the second stage surgery would be code 6011. And then once we got our implant in, if it's going to be removable, then we got to do those locators. If it's a full-size implant, then the locator is 6052 for each full-size implant. We'd put down 6052 twice, and then we'd put down the 6111 overdenture lower, assuming it's a mandible.
Now, do you know what the definition for the mini implant is over a conventional? Because there's a lot of implants now that are kind of blurring the lines between a traditional and an implant, and I don't know where to draw the line there. Is it 3?
I don't know exactly on the number of millimeters thickness. I forgot if we in our book defined exactly what what that diameter is. The manufacturers certainly call them a lot of times mini implants and full-size implants. And so the mini implant a lot of times though has that ball on it, and so it's kind of an all-in-one screw, so to speak. Yes, yeah. Kind of an all-in-one.
Typically under 3 millimeters, potentially. That might be.
I think 3 millimeters is it. Yeah, I think that's probably the situation in terms of the roughly the diameter there. And that's a long-term mini implant too. That's 6013. We also have some pads, for orthodontics.
The temporary anchorage devices, whether they're for orthodontics or for short-term stabilization of a denture, while permanent implants are integrating. Yeah. Now,
exactly.
Speak on the, if you could, just the abutments on a simple, basic one tooth implant. You've got multiple abutment options and restoring options on top of that. What should a restoring dentist know about abutments and crowns that are going on top of implants?
Okay. First of all, there's two general systems. And right now, the most popular is what we call the abutment supported crown. And that means there's the implant, code 6010, and we put an abutment in there. Now, there are three abutments. There's an interim abutment, and that is code 6051.
Is that like a healing abutment?
Well, it's an interim abutment, and frankly, where it might go, let's say we pull number 8, we put an implant in, we do an immediate interim abutment in it, we put a temporary crown, and by the way, there will be a new, I think it's 6085 is going to be the new implant temporary crown. We've never had that. That starts January 1. So anyway, the interim abutment is 6051. And then the prefab abutment is 6056. The custom abutment is 6058. And so, or 6057 rather, 6057. And so we've got either a prefab abutment or a custom abutment, and that's independently cemented into the abutment. Then the crown that goes on top, the technical name of the crown is, it's an abutment supported crown. And if it's ceramic, it's 6058. If it's porcelain fused to high noble, it's 6059. Now that's one type of system. The other system we call an implant supported crown. That's the one piece UCLA screw retained crown. And that's where that one piece crown screws directly into the implant. So we're talking one piece with that system. Now we're seeing some confusion in the marketplace. Some of the labs are coding out or charging on their invoicing. They're charging a crown and they're charging a separate abutment, but they're really delivering a single crown, one piece screw retained crown. So what does the doctor code out here? That's going to be an implant supported crown, and that's 6065. That's a ceramic. 6066 is any kind of porcelain fused to metal. So it depends on the pieces. If I separately put an abutment in the implant and a separate crown, that's an abutment supported system. If I put a one piece screw retained crown in, that's an implant supported crown. So there's lots of confusion in those two systems and how that works.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's why I wanted to address that, because there is some confusion on what the lab is doing, what you're getting, how you're being reimbursed, and what you can bill for. Because I know in the end you're getting a tooth that sits on an implant, but how you're coding and billing and working with your laboratory can be two completely different pathways. And so those definitely have to be accounted for when treatment planning and billing, for sure. One
other thing is the surgeon, whoever cements the abutment is who can code that out. So we see some oral surgeons, some periodontists, they give the prefab abutment to the GP, and then they code out the implant and they code out the abutment, and that's wrong. It would be a 6199, just an unspecified. So whoever torques the abutment down, places it, let's say who places the abutment is the one who would code that out. Now, some of the forward-looking periodontists, oral surgeons, what we're seeing on some of them is they've got scanners and they'll place the implant, they'll scan, and they'll actually send it to the lab, and then the lab gives the GP the crown, and then the patient comes into the GP, and the GP just essentially cements the crown at that point, or does a screw retained crown. So it's amazing the technology and kind of where we're going down the railroad path. But we're seeing GPs now with that technology that's doing the whole works. And they may also, from a practice management standpoint, they might run a special. And we're seeing some, advertising that implant plus crown, the whole works for X number of dollars. And when I go to big cities in my lecturing, particularly, I see these ads all the time of typically they're general practitioners that are advertising the complete restorative game right there.
Yeah, kind of bundling the whole option. If they can say, yes, I can place it and restore it, I can control the parameters involved with that. And here's your time frame and cost A to Z, and can kind of knock down some of the overhead and the middlemen in there. So, yeah.
For years, I've taught that the most efficient procedure that a general practice can do on a per hour basis is single appointment anterior endo. That's awfully hard to beat if you're organized and know how to do it. But now I'm teaching that, hey, wait a minute, I think placement of implants per hour is actually trumping even the endo on a per hour, basis. So there's lots of, as you know, there's lots of training programs around the country and a good bit of CE available. And then also some specialists will take a GP under the arm and say, hey, I'll help you do some simple stuff, and you refer me to complicated stuff. So we see those, alliances sometimes out there too. Yeah.
No, I think a well-streamlined system can be very efficient with implant placement. And like you said, the technology is definitely allowing that to happen. Now,
also the cone beam is definitely coming in. Some say, well, that's the standard of care. I'm not sure exactly there. I know if you screw up though, and then a cone beam could have prevented that, then hey, you get in court. Well, I wouldn't want to be in court sort of that way. So I know myself, if I'm going to get an implant, I'm going to have one done here, frankly, myself, and hey, I want a cone beam.
I agree. Once I started using one, I realized I wouldn't do it any other way.
Yeah. And the other thing is some technologies have not come down so much. We're finally seeing some movement with CAD-CAM for years. That's been sort of up there about 140,000, but that's, dropping. But the cone beam has been consistently dropping back, and we're seeing some pretty doggone good systems now at, $75,000, $85,000 dollars is the price point now, I think, for a lot of cone beam systems. And so, and with cone beam too, you can, if you just do an endo, you can radiate just that area. And then the beauty of cone beam, I think the main thing with cone beam is, and by the way, it's not generally billable to medical. I can talk about that in a moment, but I think the value of the cone beam is not so much what we're going to get from it, in terms of money, but it's more in its application. It's going to allow us to do implants. It's going to allow us to do extractions and endo, knowing where all the roots and things are. And so the cone beam technology can really up the ante of giving you a picture of just where are you and keeping you, out of trouble.
Yeah. When we purchased our cone beam, we haven't increased the value from a billing standpoint of charging cone beams and making money that way, but it has allowed us to do so many more procedures with such greater care and actually faster and more predictable that we're able to make up the income that way and also do it legally and ethically at a higher level. So I think there's the value in cone beam. But if you could just talk a moment about some coding for cone beam, if you will, and potentially medical billing for cone beam or implants, and maybe the direction you see things heading that way, as there are more medical billing specialists out there trying to get into dentistry.
Okay. I did want to say there is also an implant index, and it's a fairly new code. I don't know. Heck, it's been around 3 or 4 years, I guess, but code 6190. And this is a surgical guide and index. It can be everything from a sophisticated CAD/CAM $400 or $500 lab bill type deal for a more complex case, down to a simple suck down guide of where to put, the implant. And so that's code 6190. I wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and I think that's what we use in our office for the radiographic surgical guide stints that we make for, scanning and then also for creation of surgical guides. So that 6190 has worked well for us.
Yes, that is the code, and so that code is available, and some of our listeners, might not know about that. Okay, I'll talk a bit about medical, and I'll do it a little bit globally first. First of all, the dental claim actually has 4 blocks for medical coding. The dental claim that you file every day, it has an A, B, C, D block, but it is for ICD-10 diagnostic codes. Now, the diagnostic codes tell why you did it. The procedure code tells what you did. So the diagnostic codes can be put on the dental claim. And you might say, well, wait a minute, who is requiring that? Well, about 12 states Medicaid programs now require it, and we think every Medicaid program throughout the United States will ultimately be, probably over the next year or so, will be requiring these medical ICD-10 codes. Also, some of the Affordable Care Act plans with embedded pediatric benefits require it. And we actually wrote a book about how to code the diagnostic codes on the dental claim. There's 69,000 roughly diagnostic codes, of which about 300 apply to dentistry. There's codes for getting bit by a turtle, having a knitting accident, having a space station accident. It's ridiculous. All of the ICD-10 codes that are out there. And so that's the dental claim. And if you're a pedo office, if you're a Medicaid office, I would urge you to get from our bookstore the diagnostic code book for that. Now, we just released a couple weeks ago a medical dental cross-coding manual, and it's a monster. It's 623 pages, and that covers all 677 dental codes with its appropriate diagnostic code and appropriate medical CPT code. Medical coding has been voodoo, and frankly, the medical coders, if you want to go to work in a hospital, physician's office, you've got about a 2-year associate's degree, and it's very difficult. It is a monster thing to memorize, just a lot of stuff. And so in the dental side of the coin, we see very few people certified because that medical coding training, about 2% of it is dental, 98% is lungs and heart and brain and everything else. And so in one way, you learn the mechanics of the coding, but not the specifics of dental coding. Now, medical insurance is coming more and more. One thing is we're seeing more and more plans require, if it's surgical extractions, then the dental plan says, hey, that's got to go to medical first, get a rejection, and then we'll pay for it. And a lot of dental teams just don't know how to accomplish that. Sleep apnea is virtually automatically done if you know what you're doing with medical insurance. But one of the problems with medical insurance is so many people have $1,500. We're even seeing $5,000 deductibles. So while they might pay for sleep apnea, assume the proper MD signs off on it, sleep physician, we don't see it paid a lot of times in cases because simply the deductible has not been met. But things in our book, we cover everything from newborn frenectomies, which are paid almost every time. You can do it with a soft tissue laser. Takes seconds to do the upper, seconds to lower, about $600 there for upper and lower combined. That's paid. And it's generally paid because mama's just got out of the hospital and she satisfied her deductible. And so we see those frenectomies paid, and we're seeing a lot of pediatric dentists doing that and some GPs doing that. Now, what about submitting TMJ? What about cementing cone beam and so forth? Now, cone beam is only going to be paid if it's got an associated procedure. So in other words, just to say, I'm going to fill out a cone beam and send that into medical. I'm doing dental here. I'm doing these implants and stuff, and medical's not going to pay for it. I'll just put down some cone beam codes and get paid. It doesn't work that way. And also, you've got predetermination with medical. Unless it's an emergency, you've got to put things in before the fact, before you do it. And so on the medical side, the cone beam has got to be associated with the proper procedures that qualify. So if I've got a carcinoma, I've got a cancer in the jaw or something like that, is a cone beam going to be paid in that situation? Yes. I'm putting an implant in. Is that going to be paid? Well, probably not. So it depends. And so the medical plans are specific in whether they cover implants and what they do cover. Your IV sedation, your general anesthesia, for instance, there's specific codes for that, but you can't just turn that in and they're going to pay for it. They want to know, what is that, what qualifies? Well, maybe third molars, I'm taking third molars out. Now the general anesthesia qualifies. So the medical claim, you've got the ICD-10 code kind of at the upper, and then you've got the CPT code, which is called a level 1 code, and that code is your medical coding. Interestingly, some plans, and you call them, there are some unspecified medical codes that aren't so hot. And so you call a plan, again, predetermination, do you accept dental codes? And some say yes, because the dental code is quite specific, whereas these 999 codes, they're in the medical world too, are kind of non-specific. So our book has a couple of things. It's got the top ICD-10 diagnostic codes. It's got the cross-coding, but also we've got in there on how to read a medical claim and how to lay it out. Boy, it's very, very precise. You miss things by one digit. Also, when you enter those ICD-10 codes, there's decimals in the ICD-10 codes. But when you put them on the medical claim, there is no decimals. And so a neophyte starts doing these things and gets all kinds of rejections up front. So we've got some pictures of claims. We've got scenarios of claims. We've got articles on sleep apnea, cone beams, implants, and the whole thing. So I think it is a great thing to resource to get our new medical dental cross-coding manual, and can really open some eyes. But I want to tell you, even with our manual, it is a real challenge.
Sure, because even if you got the right coding and they have the insurance, there may be specific narratives that may be necessary, or other supplemental causes that may be needed, and diagnostic charges. And so the medical billing is really quite confusing. And I think that's why you're seeing more of these medical billing groups that will help do this for you for a fee, because they know most dental offices just aren't trained and have enough information in that.
And that's a way to get the feet wet. I do want to talk a minute, though. There is some pretty bad medical fraud out here, and we've got some doctors that are just frankly thieves and greedy, and so we're seeing a little bit of fraud, and not a little bit, but a whole lot. And I'll tell you just a couple fraudulent areas. And in talking with the Medicare fraud people, and talking with some of the medical carriers, we're getting ready to see some people hung, and just as examples, because there's a lot of freewheeling out here. And I just want to mention just a couple quick things on that. One is, I can't tell my patients a sleep apnea appliance here is $1,500, $1,800, and but when we go to build your medical, we turn in $5,000, and if the medical company's crazy enough to pay the $5,000, we keep the $5,000. We give the $1,500 back to the patient that we got up front, and so you can't just arbitrarily bill a fee to an insurance company if it's not your standard fee. Now, if I'm charging everybody $5,000 for a sleep apnea appliance, no problem. But if I'm really charging, I get audited. My true fee is $1,500, but I'm turning in $5,000. That's a problem. The medical coding. There's some ethical folks out here. There's some unethical. One thing the doctor needs to be aware of is when the company says, "Doctor, you're too stupid to do this. We've got the secret sauce. We're going to be the billing entity." Now, what that means is their company bills it. It's their tax ID number, but it's the doctor's name and NPI number that goes on that medical claim. But the medical check comes to the billing company, not to the doctor under that circumstance. And then to prove the honesty, the billing company sends the doctor a check of the medical check, and then their check for 90%, minus, say, a 10% fee. So I think there's nothing wrong with the thing of a paying 10% or something there. I'm not having a problem with the fee. But the problem is where the billing company will not show the doctor what they actually turned in. They say, "That's our secret sauce. It's our coding. We're not going to show you what we did." But the problem is the doctor's name went on that claim. And if they're doing fraudulent billing, we know how to get paid for a lot of things, but by golly, I'd never have my name to it, and I would never do it. So anyway, I just thought I'd point that out. We do have a chapter in our medical book on fraud, and we're seeing a lot of freewheeling out here in some of the, the coding, this medical coding stuff. But we need to kind of clean up our act and do it appropriately. And yes, there is some medical reimbursement out there, but it is plan specific and subject to deductibles and a lot of stuff. But hey, it's well worth getting your feet wet, well worth doing it, and get an ethical billing company to hold your hand if you like. And there's good education out here, like sleep apnea. Henry Schein has that Sleep Complete program, and I'm not just going to praise some particular doctor, but John Tucker is very good, very ethical. The coding is right, and so forth. There's OSA University that can train the team. If you get into sleep apnea, in my view, you need to go big time. If you're just going to do 5-6 cases, man, it isn't worth it. And then Medicare pays for sleep apnea, but jumping through the hoops, you've got to register as a durable equipment supplier, kind of like selling wheelchairs and things. And so there's certain hoops to jump through. And but if you're going to advertise it, get a relationship with the sleep labs and physicians in the area, go big time, it's probably going to cost you $20,000 to get the training, maybe $6,000 for a monitor, roughly. And these monitors in some states, like North Carolina, it's illegal for a doctor to do a monitor on sleep apnea. The state board will tell you real quick in North Carolina. Other states you can. So, it's kind of a minefield to jump through all these things, but, you pay $20,000 to really learn to do it right and start doing 100 cases a year. That's a pretty significant cash flow. And it's one where the doctor needs a super trained staff and can delegate to the staff all the communication. And so it's kind of like in ortho. To make money in ortho, the doctor can't do all the work. You've got to have assistants and delegate to the assistants if you're going to make any money in ortho. And same thing in sleep apnea. If you want to go big time, you really need some superb training of the team and excellent billing and, the whole thing up and down the line there.
Sure. Yeah, no, I know that medical side is pretty daunting, and that's what's kept me out of it. But I know as things progress, there may be more crossover. Now speak a moment on some common mistakes you see with implant billing as it's specific. What are the most common mistakes a general dental office might make with implants, and what are some things to look for, like you said, over the next year?
The most common we see, they might use an abutment code and then turn in a standard crown. And that's really, I won't say it's fraudulent, it's certainly misleading. And so we see some that even at the level, they just put a abutment down and then put down their standard, ceramic crown, zirconia crown, or whatever. The other coding error that is big time is they might put down an abutment and then use the screw retained crown code 6065 ceramic, which would be wrong. And so not structuring and getting into alignment. Are they doing the UCLA one-piece screw retained crown? Are they doing the abutment supported? And then are they using the correct coding? And I'd say that's errors that we see with the GPs. We also see where they're filling out a regular implant crown code, and the UCR is better if it's an implant overdenture and not using these new 6,000 code categories that we've already gone over, and that's a mistake. We're seeing with full-size implants, they're using the 5862 locator code instead of the new 6052 code, and that's, again, a error with implants. We're seeing where they're using the osseous surgery bone graft code and should be using the bone socket code, which is 7953. We're seeing them charge an inflated fee for the bone graft, which includes the membrane, and they should charge a more reasonable bone graft code and then a more reasonable separate membrane. And the membrane is 4266, and a lot of them do not know the membrane code. So those are, I would say those are kind of the top implant coding errors that we see there with general dentists.
Yeah, and I would agree with you mostly because those are a lot of mistakes early in my implant career that I made, and kind of found out trial by fire, and definitely the more that we've learned, and we've taken your courses a couple times and gotten all your books with the pictures and the narratives, we've definitely refined our systems. But it was, to someone who doesn't do a lot of implants, it's definitely a new language, and it's a language that's been changing a lot in the past 5 years and probably will continue to change as implant dentistry changes. So I know your resources have greatly helped my practice and many others. So
yeah, with the codes coming out every year, there's a lot of changes. And one other thing, the code committee used to be a kind of, I'll call it a 50-50 vote, and it was kind of a Republicans against the Democrats. And so you had the representatives of the insurance people sitting on one side of the table at the committee, and the dentist and representatives from all the specialties and everything on the other side of the committee. And in the past, things moved slower. And what we have now is the dentist, in a sense, outgun the insurance industry. So they can pretty much pass a code, but then the insurance industry has that ultimate ace. Well, you pass it, we're not going to cover it. So, for instance, they passed gingival irrigation, but yet most companies say, no, that's a part of SRP and we're not going to pay for it separately. They passed the gingivectomy for restorative access, code 4212, and the insurance company says, no, when you do a crown, when you do a filling, any soft tissue management is a part of that. So now it's a more collegial group. They're getting a good many more codes through the system, and it takes a couple years for a new code, though, to become payable. And it's got to be a code that is submitted in popular, and it's got to be a code that the employer says, I'm willing to pay, for that. So these employers, they sit down and the insurance companies, they review the new codes and say, are we going to cover these new codes or not? By the way, I will tip off the audience, there is a new code, 4346, that plugs a gap. Historically, doctors either kind of did a prophy or they did scaling and root planing. But what if the patient just has, I'll call it a filthy mouth, they've got a high gingival inflammation. There's no bone loss. We can do an exam. So I want the listeners to be sure that you thoroughly research and learn about 4346 prior to the January 1 implementation date. So there is a new code for that. I'll call it kind of a dirty mouth prophy in a way. It's where we can do an exam. There's no bone loss, and there's lots of calculus crud. We diagnose this with our intraoral camera, with our probing and charting. And so we would do a 4342 as an example starting January 1, and then get the patient back maybe a few weeks later, a month later, and do a prophy, and then put the patient on 6-month recall. This is that patient that comes back, grungy mouth, hadn't been to the dentist in 3-4 years, whatever. And so, it takes 2 cleaning visits to put them back into routine 6-month status.
Sure. And is that different than a gross debridement?
Yes.
Okay.
A gross debridement means that, and the name of the code is gross debridement, to enable a comprehensive exam. So a new patient walks in the door, I can either do an exam or not. So if I look at the mouth and they got a calculus bridge, I can't even see the teeth, we're going to do a gross debridement. We're going to do a major film today, but we're not going to do an exam. And then at the second visit, I'm going to charge out my exam. I'm going to either do a prophy, maybe that's a young adult, that's all they need, or they need root planing. So a gross debridement is where we can't do the exam. It's preliminary. The patient might or might not be a perio patient, it turns out. So that's your distinction. This 4346 code, we can do the exam up front. We can see the teeth. We can probe. There's no bone loss, but it's a bunch of crap to clean up.
It's just a really overdue heavy cleaning.
That's right.
And then what's their next follow-up?
The next, you'd wait a couple weeks after that first cleaning, that 4346 scaling, as it's called, and then you'd follow that a couple of weeks, 2-4 weeks at the doctor's discretion. We'd then kick in with our prophy. And then at that point, hopefully the patient's caught up, and we're going to put them on 6 months prophy at that point.
Sure. Well, I know my hygienist is going to be excited about that because that's one of the battles we face every day. And
yep, let her know about that one.
Yeah, it's that patient that really doesn't have periodontal disease, but it's usually a young professional that doesn't have a disease but hasn't had a cleaning in 5 years, and just really needs to be caught up more than anything else.
Yeah, you nailed that. That's correct.
Well, I think we're over our time limit than I promised, and I've probably gathered more free information than I should have today. But I definitely want to thank you for your time today, and tell my listeners again, where can they go for resources, and what should they be looking for as far as the resources you offer in addition to just your lectures? I know you've got a website and web resources and books. So review for our listeners what you can help them with again.
Okay. To really learn about me, go to practicebooster.com. Practicebooster.com, of course, has our store on it. And if you're a member, then you've got access to the newsletter and to the electronic code book and all that. But if you want to know where I'm lecturing, just go to Practice Booster, go to the events, and I'm lecturing somewhere around the country about, every week. And where I'm lecturing now, I am adding medical coding, like I might be doing a all-day Friday, but then on Thursday evening, I might do a 2-hour medical cross-coding. So I have added that to my speaking. You're not going to see that right now on my speaking calendar, but you will see that over the next month here. You'll see us be adding some of that to the dates. Now, the bookstore, I just want to tell you about our products, and sometimes it gets a little confusing. If you want paper, if you say, I'm not interested in internet, nothing like that, I just want pure paper, then we have a bundle. The bundle is made up of the code book and the admin book, and it's $189. So if you want to go paper, get the bundle. Now, if you want to go online and be able to look up anything, then, and also if you want support, both medical and dental support, then subscribe to Practice Booster, and that is the online system. It includes support. It includes the newsletter. The newsletter can be bought standalone on our website, but I would encourage the best deal is to get Practice Booster plus the $99 admin book. So I'd either go paper for $189, or I'd go the online for $297 plus $99 for the administrative book. And then in the medical area, the cross-coding manual is $366, I believe, and it's worth every penny. And frankly, the doctor ought to read that book. Don't just hand it to the front business team. Really, the doctor particularly needs to read the administrative book, because our call center, more than half of the calls are not coding, but insurance administration. And I can tell you that the average doctor and team member, even with 25 years experience, probably doesn't know half of what's in that admin book, because it is full. And the first edition of the admin book was 200 pages. The next edition was 300. And the current admin book, it'll be shipping in about next week. I think we're getting them in. That book is 416 jam pages. Now, the admin book, also 20% of it is coding. And so in the administrative book, we've got articles about record keeping and narratives and how to do all kinds of stuff. In there is also, there's about 4 or 5 pages in the admin book that's the top coding errors that are made in a dental office. And if you would go through that page by page, you probably put 25 grand in your pocket pretty quick, just by buying the admin book and going through the coding section of it, which is a minor part. It's about 20%.
Sure. But it's those 20% of things that you're doing wrong where you're leaving a lot of heartache and hassles and money out there that could be making you a better run practice and making patients happier and collecting more.
The accounting profession, if I go to an accountant, they're 99.9999%. Are they going to have up-to-date tax books? Are they going to have tax software? If I go to an accountant, they wouldn't be caught dead without just the latest. But if I go in a dental office, get this, here's the statistics. 70% of dental offices do not have a current code book. 70% do not. And even the ADA book is only $39, $49. They got an $800,000 practice on average, and 70% of offices won't even keep up, with the current code book. So our profession has got some real issues keeping up with OSHA, HIPAA, and frankly, the practice of dentistry is it's frankly getting beyond, a lot of dentists out here if they don't put that time and effort. And that's why, again, the corporations, that 2-3 doctor practice can afford a true business manager and kind of keep up with everything. But that solo doctor that's out, kind of an average solo doctor, is just getting more and more challenged. And we just got to spend a little money on our team and continuing education. And it's not just the clinical side that the doctor does, but we've got to keep up with that OSHA, HIPAA. 2 other things I'll just quickly say, and then we're done. I did want to put this on the radar screen. Delta Dental in Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan has now announced that if you don't join Medicare, you will be kicked out of your in-network status. They're doing that to build a Advantage Medicare. That's your Medicare Advantage plans. And so Delta is after kind of increasing and having one of the biggest networks. And I kind of take my hat off to them strategically. This is kind of what they're doing. But I did want you to know, in your particular state, just kind of watch out, because it may be that if you don't join Medicare, then you will be kicked out of network.
And where did you say that was?
Well, right now it's just 3 states. It's Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan. But we're looking for, the rest of the states to maybe do that. So I just wanted to put on everybody's radar that may be coming down. And if you've opted out of Medicare, it means that you're grandfathered temporarily until your 2-year opt-out period is up. And then at that point, you'd have to join, Medicare. The second thing is if you do federal plans, If you do Medicaid, Medicare, you do FedVIP, the postal unions, you do military dependents, blah, 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 blah. Then in October, you've got to post an interpretation bulletin, and it's supposed to be posted publicly in your office and list the top 15 languages for your state, all the way down to Mandarin or whatever all the different languages would be. And then you're supposed to pay for that interpreter out of pocket. If a blind person would come in or whatever, again, in interpretation or whatever. And so I just wanted to put that on the radar screen. And we'll see, there's internet companies that provide interpretation services that charge around $2 to $6 a minute. And so you'd get one of them and then get on the speakerphone and call them, tell them what language you want, and then they could interpret for you. So that's another, again, small business regulation that's on us. And so, you know, what's around the next corner for we dentists at this point. So anyway, we'll sign off, and my pleasure being here. And please go to Practice Booster for further, you know, information and to see the various tools that we do have available to help you.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Blair. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you this afternoon, and I will hopefully be seeing you around the country again on one of your seminars, and I will definitely be keeping up to date with all of your information, as I find it to be definitely the most current and valuable of its kind. So appreciate your time today.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Gordon.
Yep. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.